Tonight, in On the Record, we're looking at an issue affecting many of you, our viewers. A woman is raped approximately every 26 seconds in South Africa. Gender-based violence and harassment is rife, and strong, beautiful, educated and professional women are not exempt. We will shortly look at a shocking report about harassment at the SABC that came out this week. But first, we're doing something different. We're about to speak to the survivor of a violently abusive relationship who hid it well as her star rose as an on-air news TV reporter. This is just one excerpt from Vanessa Govender's book, Beaten, Not Broken. So I'm going to read. He pushed me against the wall. He took my head in both his hands and started banging it against the wall over and over and over. Hard, measured, deliberate. Thud, thud, thud. Vibrations of pain were shooting through my skull. He didn't stop. He couldn't stop. He was too far gone. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I'm sorry, I begged. Please, I'm so sorry. After what seemed like an eternity of banging my head against the wall, I saw softness and some sanity creeping into his black eyes. Still holding my head in his hands, he suddenly kissed me hard and deep. I tasted ash and emptiness. My tongue was like cardboard, dry, desolate, and unwilling. But slowly I allowed my hands to reach out to hold his face gently, and I kissed him with what I hoped was unbridled fervor, anything to restore calm and stop his frenzied attack. Anything. Vanessa Govender now joins us via Skype. Vanessa, thank you for being with us. Many people, our paths crossed, and I was one of many who just didn't know that this was part of your past. Just tell us first how long you suffered in silence.
Good evening, Francis. I started dating this man in December of 1999. I was barely into my job as a radio news reporter at the SABC. Our relationship ended in May 2005, so it spanned nearly 6 years. And I had just started my job at ETV in May of 2005 when we had one violent last encounter in the car park of the SABC. So, that's pretty much how long we were together. I wouldn't really say it was that much silence because there were people who were aware. My family had found out. There were certainly people at work who knew what was going on. And it was nearly six long years of violence, of verbal abuse, of physical abuse, of sexual abuse. Nearly 6 years in which I lost the essence of who I was as a woman and as a human being.
You say people knew and you felt that pity from them, but explain what it's like to live like that in an abusive relationship, but trying to lie, trying to cover it up, trying to get out, but you feel trapped.
It's a difficult one because you try very hard to project an image of who and what people think you are, and I think to a large degree I did a very good job of masking what was going on. Obviously, the bruises or the injuries, and in the one instant, a bloodied nose, which left the ladies' toilet, a few meters away from the studio, quite bloodied and messed. So those were the sort of, only telltale evidence of what was going on. Feeling worthless, feeling useless, feeling completely alone, because this is what they do to you. They isolate you. And it's what he did to me, and in hindsight, I realized it was a very clever, cunning way of ensuring I don't speak to other people. And in speaking to other people, who knows what I may let slip, or who knows what I may find out about him, because I found out a lot of stuff now about infidelities which were happening at the station at the time. You have no choice but to keep silent, because how on earth do you tell people your boyfriend, the man who loves you, supposedly loves you, the man you supposedly love, is beating you, punching you, kicking you, and even at times forcing you to be intimate with him when you really don't want to be? So it's all about projecting an image and keeping a reputation or an ideal perception of what people have of you, because that for me was far more attractive than who and what I really was at that time.
You were a newsreader at Lotus FM and he was a DJ at Lotus FM. You've chosen not to name him, Vanessa.
Francis, I've come under a bit of flack for that. From some people, from some quarters, people wanting to know why I haven't named him, feeling it's a bit of a cop-out. This is my story. This is my narrative. It is my journey. It is my experience. I will dictate and I will define how it gets told. I will not have his name appear anywhere near mine on the pages of a book that's going to last for all eternity. I am not going to give that monster oxygen in my story. His name is irrelevant. His name is irrelevant. What he's done is relevant. What he's done is important. People seem to be fixated on who he is. Figure it out if you can. But I'm not here to satisfy people's curiosity, because sometimes I think that's what it boils down to. This is my narrative. It's my journey. This was started as a process to heal myself, and I'm not going to be hijacked by the man who beat me up. I'm not going to give him life. He does not deserve any space in my narrative. And people may have their thoughts and opinions of it, and that's fine. But this is my story. I get to call the shots on what I put in and what I leave out.
You've written this so that other women can start to understand, maybe be encouraged to speak out. I think there is judgment, and you've dealt with this. People look in and say, how does a woman stay with a man who beats her, kicks her? It sounded like he was raping you at times. I think you have laid out that it becomes like an addiction. You've laid out that you come from a conservative family. He was the first man you slept with. Is it very difficult to say this is a simple reason of why I stayed?
It may sound feeble, and it's always easier for people on the outside to have, to make judgment. It's very easy until you're in that situation. You can never comprehend what it's like. Yes, there were a lot of, self-imposed restrictions as to why I stayed, self-imposed reasons, as to why I stayed. He was my first intimate partner. People knew we were together. I come from a very conservative community. People knew we were together. So how on earth do I now walk away? Who's going to want me after this? Who's going to love me after this? I think it's well-intentioned values that are placed in us growing up, but I don't necessarily think they're practical. I don't think they're reasonable, and I don't think they're sensible to a certain degree, because I was shackled to that relationship because of these reasons. And yes, to somebody on the outside, it might seem ridiculous, but like I say, until you're in it, you don't know how to leave. You don't know how to get out. And it's a vicious cycle. It's cliched. It's cliched in every sense. It doesn't matter whether you're an educated, empowered woman or whether you're somebody from far-flung rural South Africa. The rules of engagement of an abusive relationship, it's one and the same for every relationship. It doesn't matter who you are. And I stayed. I stayed for fear. He instilled fear in me that if I ever thought about leaving, I would live to regret it. If I ever thought of starting a relationship with somebody else, that person would be sorry for ever laying eyes on me. I was young. I was naive. I was out of my depth. I was in my first relationship. This man was idolized by many. Who would ever believe me? Who would ever believe me that he was doing that? Yes, there were people within us, around us, who knew or suspected what was going on. But would they believe it? You know, if I had come out in details about what was happening, but how could I even speak out? How could I even speak out when I myself found it hard to reconcile myself as a journalist, as an empowered woman, and being, you know, the punching bag of my partner?
Sure. Thank you for speaking out and giving us just a taste of what it's like to be in a very violent, very abusive relationship. That was the author of Beaten But Not Broken, Vanessa Govender. After the break, we'll be looking at an independent inquiry that has blown the lid off seemingly systemic sexual harassment at the SABC. Stay with us.
Hanover Park is known to be a playground for gang members. Several pupils failed to attend classes due to gang shootings.
The impact of these gang wars is that we find that learners stay away from school.
There's a lot of disruptions, but yet I try to come every day to school so that I can have a better future.
As an education department, which is not our primary mandate to address crime, we do what we can to ensure that our learners and teachers are safe in schools.
In pursuit of good results for a better future, these learners have all come here to what is commonly known as study camps. They bath, eat and sleep here. Learners believe that their sacrifices will bear fruit.
Once we give the best of our results and we get enough chance to spend with our teachers.
The local business people are giving us food, are supporting us big time.
This year we must have 100%.
All right, tonight in On the Record, we're looking at sex for jobs. In June this year, the SABC announced the establishment of a commission of inquiry into sexual harassment. The inquiry heard mostly from workers who have left the organisation and claimed that no action was taken against the managers who harassed them. The findings are a wake-up call for the corporation and the country and show how many women in the workplace are vulnerable. Here's a quick overview, if you missed it earlier this week, the findings of the inquiry. HR failed to follow procedure. Many are scared to speak out and lose their jobs. Listen to this. No alleged perpetrator was ever suspended or found guilty. Most cases reported came from Lotus FM and Channel Africa. The recommendations include that SABC needs to develop a culture that embraces gender rights, that SABC should provide a budget for the effective implementation of sexual harassment policy. The policy on the appointment of freelancers needs to be more inclusive. To discuss, we're going to keep author Vanessa Govender with us. She worked early on in her career at Lotus FM. We're also joined by the chairperson of the inquiry into sexual harassment at the SABC, Barbara Watson. Also in studio, Labour lawyer from Moni Attorneys Incorporated, Natasha Moni. Good evening to you both.
Good evening, Francis.
Barbara, let me start with you. We spoke earlier in the week and there was just so much more to get through. I was raising the concern that managers at the SABC, still in this building, have been named by alleged victims and they're still in their jobs. Just explain how that's happening.
I think what's important to remember is there are legal processes. I think Ms. Moni will touch on that. What we have done was to investigate why were those people still in their jobs? And also, how is it possible that sexual harassment would have taken place and the complainant still feels justice was not done? And because we were an independent entity and not a judicial commission, we couldn't then take the next step of trying literally the perpetrators. So what we've done is we've collected all the information that is required so that the SABC can now charge those people, which is the main recommendation. What was done previously did not follow procedure, nor did it follow the law or the code of good conduct in dealing with sexual harassment. So in fact, the process was flawed. So now it has to be redone, and I'm hoping that the first step would be, of course, to give letters and the alleged perpetrators will be suspended.
So you're leaving this up to the SABC, which hasn't covered itself in glory in the past in this issue?
Well, part of this publicity around the report is to make sure that SABC is not allowed to get away with it. But I think also there is commitment. You have a new board, you have a new leadership that so far has expressed the desire to correct the wrongs of the past. They have also asked us if we would be willing to be part of the process. So we will make sure that it is done.
Natasha Mani, you've looked at a lot of these sort of cases. How does that sound to you?
Quite frankly, for me, as a labour lawyer and as a sexual harassment and workplace bullying expert, it's not enough. It has scratched the surface, and thank you very much, but it's simply not enough. What you have is you have what seems like known sex offenders getting a second chance. They should have been suspended immediately. And in fact, one of when I read through the reports, one of the issues that I thought of is that it really does need the outsourcing department, your HR department to be outsourced completely to legal specialists and psychological specialists and HR specialists now, not in a month's time, now. You need to implement plans. I understand that money needs to be set aside for a sexual harassment policy. A guideline in terms of handling sexual harassment is written. It is law already. So implement it immediately and put the money towards assistance, help, support of the victims of these heinous crimes. What you have is you have the working wounded. And it's not only sexual harassment, it is also workplace bullying. I hear from Vanessa and I glean from between the lines in terms of the report. There's been a lot of intimidation, there's been a lot of fear, there's been a lot of victimization and discrimination. And that is the reason why I'm saying we've scratched the surface, but we now need to put an end to it. And this is how I believe we can put an end to it. Have an all-inclusive preventative strategy that is educative, awareness, monitoring, profiling, and preempts in terms of your strategy. Regularly test, regularly deploy questionnaires, keep tabs on what's going on, profile the victims, profile those people who are the perpetrators.
But all of this takes money, like you've raised. Let's come back to that. I want to ask Vanessa, who's still with us. Your abuse took place at Lotus FM, Vanessa. Now, this wasn't typical harassment that the SABC was dealing with because you were in a relationship. So noting that difference, let's also note that in the SABC inquiry, they pinpointed Lotus FM as a real problem area for the SABC. Can you comment, was there anything in that environment, Vanessa, that you think maybe protected the man who was hurting you, or was that a side issue? Just let us know your thoughts on that.
I think there's just always been a culture, where this sort of thing's been prevalent. Sexual harassment, for example, obviously gender-based violence or the extremity of the violence what I faced probably didn't occur with other people because I was in a relationship with this man. But the culture and the dynamic of Lotus FM kind of made it this stinking breeding ground for these sort of sexual predators to thrive, younger staff or listeners. It was the done thing. I started there young, naive, wet behind my ears. Within a month or two of my starting there, I'd already known who was having an affair with whom, who was sleeping with whom. It was the general culture. You ask me what sort of enables this? And it's a conversation I had with Barbara when we chatted, a few weeks ago. It's the demographic and it is the setup of Lotus FM. You've taken a whole bunch of Indian people, stuck them into this little radio station and let them get on with the business, run the show, do as they see fit. And it almost seemed like people just left to their own devices. So people are getting drunk on power. You've got predominantly male managers getting drunk on power. You've got male presenters who are now, thriving off the spotlight, and feeding off the attention that they're getting, and in a not a very positive or pleasant way. And if you were young and you were female and you were working there, chances are you were going to get hit on. And you're going to just have to accept it. It comes with the territory, I've been there for 5 years. I do not know anything different. It was there. It was just the damn thing. If you got hit on, it's one of those things, For me, I was in a relationship with somebody, so it didn't quite allow other males to, move in on that. But we were aware of other women who were, getting hit on or inappropriate comments being made. You laugh it off, you move on, because what do? You cannot challenge these men. You are risking your jobs. You are risking, being relegated. It's a ladder that you got to climb in broadcast, Francis. You know this yourself. Okay. So if you step on the wrong toes, or if you rebuff somebody's advances, outwardly, or blatantly, you are going to, suffer the consequences for it. Thankfully, I never had that part, but,
All right. So Vanessa, Natasha Moni in studio is jumping up and down. What's your comment? And I will come back to you because you've spoken about
Lotus. And so is Barbara. Your comment before Vanessa said something was this: the SABC doesn't have money for this. But the SABC doesn't have money for the enormous amount of cases that are going to come its way in terms of vicarious liability if it doesn't do anything.
Could this be a class action?
This could not only be a class action, but this could possibly be the end of the SABC, especially since it doesn't have any money. I have some solution in terms of that. Before you start with your retrenchments, because they are in the pipeline too, please don't allow any person who is a possible perpetrator, any person who has colluded with the perpetrators, any person who has been a benefactor or beneficiary of sexual favors to get a retrenchment package. Sort them out first, discipline them first, and then let those people go who have legitimately been here and have not used power and control in order to get where they are today.
So I did raise the concern. It's a concern from me as a worker that there are still managers here that we don't know who they are. And to Natasha's point earlier, why could they not have been suspended immediately, or why could you not have recommended that?
Well, we have recommended. I think it's very important that you understand we had terms of reference. And based on our terms of reference, we've made our findings and recommendations. And the findings are simply that sexual harassment took place. There is evidence, and now action should take place. So that is, it isn't that people are going to be getting away with it. And in fact,
so you believe you went as far as you could go?
We couldn't go beyond that. But we have recommended distinctly, some of them, suspension while the case is taking place. But I also want to go back to something that Natasha said, because you see, sexual harassment cannot, it isn't about, it's not a biological thing. It's a social behavior. It is the way you socialized, and therefore, as much as it seems like a cop-out, but you have to do a paradigm shift in the way people look at women, the way men treat women, or other people with different sexual orientation. As much as you deal with the legal part of it, as a preventative measure, because it is better to prevent sexual harassment than to treat it, because treating it is very costly. The kinds of costs you were talking about. So our report does say X did this to this one, SABC botched it through HR, not implementing according to the law and procedure, and therefore start the process immediately. And usually the first step is precautionary suspension while you're doing the investigation. So all of those steps that you're talking about have been alluded to and in fact recommended to specific cases.
Okay, so now we have to hold the SABC to account for following that up.
Exactly, yes.
Do you take that, Natasha, that we're talking about not only a SABC issue here, but a societal issue? There was a survey earlier this year saying 30% of women in the workplace, strong women like Vanessa have experienced harassment. Hers went much further, but just harassment. And how do we change that culture? How do you first start identifying the perpetrators?
Well, my suggestion and the suggestion from the law courts are report it immediately. Don't sit back. Don't wait for it to get better. Don't see what's going to happen around it. Report it absolutely immediately.
And when is it crossing the line? A comment, something said by a manager?
It's very subjective. I might be a type of person who likes to hug everybody in the morning, but there might be somebody who doesn't want to be hugged. Then I might be a person who makes comments about how sexy somebody is. But there might be somebody who perceives that comment as some sort of sexual harassment, but it goes further. I might like a tennis star and find the tennis star hanging a picture of this tennis star hanging upside down in somebody's office in the hope that somehow her skirt will fall down. That's sexual harassment too. So, and those things need to be reported. It's the little small things that you need to set your boundaries. You are working with somebody who is not your boyfriend, not your girlfriend, not a partner of yours for 8 hours a day, and sometimes even longer. You need to set your boundaries. And then secondly, you need to discourage relationships within the workplace. We work with one another. If I'm a shareholder, I want you to work. I do not want you to have a relationship, a sexual relationship with anybody in the workplace. That is for me a conflict of interest with the business.
So we're talking about these crossings of the line. How bad was it, Barbara? You gave us an incident earlier in the week, but was sex exchanged for jobs at the SABC?
Yes, we had the one category where it was a clear-cut sexual harassment, as Natasha indicated, the different types. But there's also the other section that we called sex for special favor, almost like a quid pro quo kind of thing. In some instances, for example, there was one case where an HR person said, in order for you to get the job that you had applied for but didn't qualify for, I can sacrifice my security and get you that job. And in exchange, you either have to sleep with me, but if you find that objectionable, out of your salary of 11,900 Rand a month, you give me 1,900 for a period I can't remember.
So there were actual options. This is bizarre.
Oh yes, and in that particular instance, this particular HR person drove to now, you are an HR person, you have access to my information. So you know where I live, you drive to my home one afternoon. Is it to make sure that I don't run away without paying you, or what?
Incredible.
Yes, so that's so there were these two types of sex for jobs. Yes.
Vanessa on Skype, how does it make you feel hearing stories of many women at the SABC? Your case is different. We've discussed that, but could it perhaps make you think of taking this up legally?
You know, it's not something that I have ruled out. And even during my conversation with the commission, you know, at the end, Mfano, who's also part of the commission, asked me, you know, what would my thoughts be on the Gender Commission itself taking up a case for me. And I'm still afraid of this man. I will always be afraid of this man. that is the curse I will carry. For all my bravery or supposed bravery for speaking out, I am afraid of him, Can I tell you, in the past 2 or 3 days, I've heard from different people, all deterring me from coming out and mentioning his name. It's like people that I actually really don't even know that have been saying, you've written your book, you've said what you need to say, it's time to kind of move on. You're going to open up a whole other can of worms. He's going to come back at you with this, that, and that. But to anybody with half a brain who's read that book will see it is littered with witnesses, that some of whom are family, some of whom are former colleagues. This book was not written on a whim, But then when I hear these sort of comments coming at me, I'm scared all over again. Because why am I hearing this? And why am I hearing this from people I don't really know? Because it seems like almost as if it's a subtle way of saying, back off. It's time to back off. You've said what you need to say, back off. I don't know, Francis, in all honesty, don't know. Part of me, and a very big part of me, wants to see this through all the way to the end. He robbed me of very many things. My dignity, for one. He almost cost me my job during that last violent encounter, which you read at the start of the show. I could never go back to reading news on Lotus again without dissolving into panic attacks. I could never go back into that studio without breaking down, without suffocating, feeling like I'm suffocating and feeling claustrophobic in that space. That is how damaging it is. So much so that even all these years later, 13 years later, I'm on antidepressants, I'm on anti-anxiety pills. I have moments where I feel like I just want to get out of this world, get out of the skin, this body that I'm in. That is the everlasting effects of the trauma. And that is never going to go, So at times I'm enraged and I'm angry. I found my voice. I would never be having this conversation now with so much of force, with so much of, power, because I was never that person before. But I found my voice, I found my power, and I feel like I should see it through. But I'm also feeling quite intimidated by the things that I've been hearing, I'm feeling quite intimidated, and I've got to ask myself, where's it coming from? This man clearly wields power still, and trying to influence me in some subtle way. But, there were just colossal failures before during our relationship and my time at the SABC. He was given a platform twice at the radio station, You and I both know what the newsroom environment is like, okay? So somebody gets wind of something that's going on. There's no way that stays with that person. That sort of gossip or rumors are passed around. I know now for a fact that a lot of other people knew. Yes, there were people there who knew and who helped me. One woman in particular, made it her mission to continuously ask me to leave. But it's not as easy as saying, get out and leave. Any abused woman will tell you that. If it was that easy, a lot of them wouldn't end up dead at the hands of their partner. With an exception of this one woman who helped me and who made it her business of getting involved, I'm pretty sure that there were people sitting at management level who knew or at best suspected. I say to, and I've said to you, this is the newsroom culture. We all know what's happening in everybody's lives. We all know who's sleeping with with wherever. You've seen a bloodied bathroom floor. You've seen me come to work with, bruises on my face. I hear once this book has come out that somebody was actually aware that I had my nose bust the one time, So I know this information.
I have to stop you there because I want Barbara Watson to come in, because what you've highlighted is that this wasn't only a relational problem, it was a bigger problem, and we've spoken about Lotus FM and the culture there. Barbara, you've pointed to a lack of diversity at Lotus FM, so that is one of the hot spots. Are you scared of being criticized that this becomes an Indian problem then?
No, I'm not concerned about that at all, because I think it's a fact. Because we also mentioned that the same thing happens at Channel Africa, where you find that at Channel Africa, in the area where we found a lot of the reports, it is again lacking in diversity, just like Lotus FM. And it was very interesting. One of the complainants from Channel Africa is a young woman from Malawi who said, you know, if this had happened to me at home in Malawi, I wouldn't be talking about it.
Sure.
But because I am in South Africa and I have learned that women have rights, I am able to report him. But the alleged perpetrator can't get over the fact that I'm objecting. He expects me to behave like a young Malawi girl.
Incredible.
Amongst all these Malawi men in that section.
We've run out of time. Natasha, obviously there's more fear because not one, I think in fact one current employee spoke out when obviously this is a bigger problem, but people who are in their jobs are trying to protect their jobs. What do you say very quickly to women facing this?
We've started with rooting out the rot, and thank you very much. But it cannot stop here, and it has to continue. And you have to empower yourself, and you have to get into the collective. Together, you can root out the rot. Singularly, you're going to be out on the fringes, feeling isolated, like Vanessa.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I wish we could carry on, but that is where we leave on the record. That was
Yes.
Barbara Watson, the chair of the inquiry into sexual harassment at the SABC. That was labour lawyer from Moni Attorneys Incorporated, Natasha Moni, and then we had the author of Beaten But Not Broken, Vanessa Govender, with us via Skype.